All right, welcome back, everyone. So, still on the road today. I'm sure y'all saw the live we did here in Washington at this. It was a rally meant to calling for the designation of the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. There is some legislation working on that. People there were supporting that. And it was tied, of course, to the Stop the Steal rally, which I'm also going to be at this Saturday for those of you going to be in Washington. Regardless, we're going to be airing it here. Now, I have a few stories today. The biggest thing I want to go over today is Texas, because this Texas lawsuit it's becoming pretty big. This Texas lawsuit seems like it's going to be the central lawsuit, pretty much determining where things are going to go. It seems everyone's putting their weight behind Texas right now. You have 39 states behind it now, and a lot of different senators putting their weight behind it. A lot of legislatures across the board putting their weight behind it. And right and left, everybody's putting their cards in terms of where they want it to go. And also Trump is now chiming in as well with it. And so Texas is going to be probably the most consequential lawsuit. The most consequential lawsuit we have right now. The Dominion Machines, Harold Ross is asking, I do have an update on that if we're going to get to it. Basically, there's an election supervisor showed a video on how Dominion software allows changing and adding of votes. The forensic analysis on that is still ongoing. I haven't heard any updates still on the forensic analysis. Grace and Brace is asking, Josh, where will you be stationed in DC Sunday? We should have a setup with the Epoch Times. I'm going to be hosting the live video feed we're going to be doing there, right in front of the National Mall, and so we're going to be pretty much right in the center of it. You probably can't miss us. So yeah, come find us there. Hey, Brian Berner, I appreciate the donation. Thank you. All right. Hey, Rita Newell, thank you. Good seeing y'all here. Yeah, appreciate it. Hey, Tammy Laru, thank you. I appreciate it also. All right, folks, let's jump into the news for today. So first off, I want to start with Texas. Let me put the link in the live chat. Hey, Kennedy Maranta, thank you also. Thanks for being here. All right, folks, I'll put this in right now. You can follow me if you want. Now, first off, 39 states pick sides in Texas Supreme Court election challenge. And keep in mind, these are states pretty much choosing where they're at, right? Choosing where they're at in terms of whether they want this to go to the Supreme Court or don't want this going to the Supreme Court. And they're each basically calling on the Supreme Court to either back it or oppose it. This is a Texas lawsuit. Texas is the main one behind this. Others are just chiming in on whether they want this to happen or not. And so let me go into it. More than 36 states and an assortment of lawmakers and third parties filed a flurry of briefs on December 10th, picking sides in a legal battle over whether the Supreme Court should consider a lawsuit brought by Texas that alleges that Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin conducted their elections in violation of the U.S. Constitution. Now, in terms of where this is at, the Supreme Court has not accepted this case yet. What we're seeing here in terms of this noise among different states, lawmakers, and so on, is them chiming in, trying to call on the Supreme Court to either take the case or ignore the case. Now, it says here, 20 Democratic attorney generals filed a brief on December 10th in support of the defendants, meaning in support of Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin, opposing the Texas lawsuit. A day earlier, 18 Republican attorney generals backed the Lone Star State. Republican Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost backed neither party and opposed the relief sought by Texas, namely that the Supreme Court should toss out the election results in the 4 contested states and order their state legislatures to pick electors in accordance with the Constitution. Now, the 4 defendant states and the 20 Democratic attorney generals constitute all but one of the Democratic attorney generals in the United States. In other words, all but one of the Democrat attorney generals in the U.S. are opposing this right now. The only exception to that was Iowa Attorney General Tom Miller. He's the only Democrat who didn't join the lawsuit as of the evening of December 10th. On the Republican side, on the other hand, attorney generals representing 5 states did not take action in the case so far. That's Idaho, Alaska, Wyoming, New Hampshire, and Kentucky. So to make it simple again, all but 6 states haven't chosen their side on this yet. All but 6 states haven't really chosen their side. Now, not saying they haven't given some statements on this, though. Now, the governor of Alaska said his state's attorney general didn't have enough time to review the lawsuit before the deadline to join the case. And this is the statement on that. It says, this is from Governor Mike Dunleavy saying in a statement that was emailed to the Epoch Times. He says this: "I'll be the first to admit that I was disappointed that we didn't have enough time to thoroughly review the details. Had this not been the case, we may have come to a different decision. My understanding is that the Supreme Court will make a quick decision prior to December 14th. Depending on the outcome, Alaska will respond accordingly." Idaho Attorney General Lawrence Wasden said he won't be participating in the case, citing concerns about counter litigation, that he's going to be afraid he's going to sue something. Now, this is a statement from him. He says, "As is sometimes the case, the legally correct decision may not be the politically convenient decision." The legally correct decision may not be the politically convenient decision. "This decision is necessary to protect Idaho's sovereignty. As Attorney General, I have significant concerns about supporting a legal argument that could result in other states litigating against legal decisions made by Idaho's legislature and governor." Well, if they're following the Constitution, that shouldn't be a problem, right? My 2 cents. Real quick, Shannon Haney, thanks for the support. Thank you for your work, Josh. Any news on the audit of Antrim County, Michigan Dominion machines? Again, those of you joining, I have not yet heard information on the results from the audit. Dominion is under continued scrutiny. The only thing I've heard from it was from one source, anonymous source, take it for what it's worth, but a source I trust deeply, who said they found some pretty serious stuff on there. And that did come out 2 days after the audit, or 2 days after they got approval for it. It was supposed to be 48 hours, and so the timing was right. We haven't seen a public report on this yet, but as soon as I get information, I'll be updating you all on that. Matt Tastic, thank you. I know you've been caught up on the U.S., but what's your thoughts about updates on the situation with Australia and China? They have been hard. They have been at us hard. Well, let's just be honest with ourselves. The Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping especially, has had close ties in the past with Joe Biden. And the Quad Alliance, the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, it's questionable whether Biden would maintain a lot of the hardline positions that Trump has taken against China, against the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, again, if you watch the live feed of the rally today, it looks like the U.S. government, if Trump gets in again, may even go so far as to label the Chinese Communist Party a transnational criminal organization, which they do function as. And you can look to similar things they've done, for example, when it comes to Iran, running terror networks and so on. They've gone after the Iranian military on a similar designation. It's not that far-fetched that they would do this to the CCP as well. When it comes to Australia and China, the CCP can act with relative impunity right now. One, because all the world's attention right now is on the U.S. elections. And number 2, if they really do believe Biden's going to get in, we can look at the presidential debates, right? If we go back to the debate between Pence, vice president, of course, and Kamala Harris, Biden's pick of VP, Harris was criticizing the Trump administration's hardline policy on the Chinese Communist Party. She was alleging that it has backfired. And going by Biden's track record with the CCP and his policy, you might remember ahead of the elections, I did a full breakdown of Biden's policies and Trump's policies. Biden's policy on China is pretty basic. It's pretty much just, in terms of what's written, it's pretty much just ask the Chinese Communist Party to have better environmental policies with the One Belt, One Road initiative, and that's about it. very, very likely a lot of countries, Japan, South Korea, many others, are going to have to seriously rethink their relations with the CCP again, and including Australia as well, again, if the US backs off a lot of these hardline policies Trump has put into place, because those hardline policies are what has allowed many of these countries to oppose the CCP, to break from the CCP, to publicly state their challenges to the CCP. It's very unlikely they would do that without that support. Let's do a couple more questions, and I'll jump more into the news updates for today. A CCP assassin, good seeing you here again. Hi, Josh. Is there any chance SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, will dismiss the case? What then? Insurrection Act? At this stage, I would highly doubt the Supreme Court would toss out this case or dismiss it. This is pure analysis, my personal analysis based on the picture I'm seeing. Take it for what it's worth. And this is based on the simple fact that pretty much the entire country, all but, 6 states have weighed in on this now. If they were to toss this out, that in itself would be viewed as a partisan move. If they were to toss this case out at this point, that in and of itself would be seen as a partisan move. They're in a state now where, again, whether they want to hear it or not, is going to be seen as them taking a stance, to them taking a side. And when the whole country to one side or the other, based mostly divided along political interests, of course, it's mostly Democrat attorney generals aligning behind Biden and mostly Republican attorney generals aligning behind the Texas, litigation, of course, which is technically behind Trump because of the way that could turn out. Even though it's divided along political lines, to toss it out means that they were refusing to look at the evidence in the first place. The Supreme Court to make that move during this time would be seen as a major politically biased move. It would be seen as a major politically biased move because it would mean that when the whole country is wanting answers on this, they are not willing to even look at the case if they're just going to dismiss it, right? If they're not going to give it a trial, if they're not going to let it say, actually look at it and judge whether the Constitution was violated or followed in this case. Frankly, I really doubt the Supreme Court would just toss it out, especially given that you could say that Trump has more of a majority in the Supreme Court. Technically, the Republican side in the Supreme Court are more in line with the Constitution. It's more of a constitutional issue in the Supreme Court than it is a party politics type thing. Although, some of them are more politically aligned. Really, you have two sides. There's a side that believes in changing the Constitution, that it's a document up for interpretation. And there's a side that believes in following the Constitution, mostly the Republican side, technically. And again, based on the information, there's a real serious chance that this case could win. I'd say almost a definite chance it will go to the Supreme Court, unless the Supreme Court tosses this out, which I really doubt they would do, given that in itself, again, would be considered a partisan stance. And number two, based on the claims in the lawsuit, namely again, that Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin violated the Constitution in the ways they ran their elections, there's a serious case for it. Again, because based on the Constitution, the way it has to be, if you want to make changes to election laws, it has to go through the state legislature. They did not follow the normal protocols. They bypassed the state legislature to change the way elections can be done. In other words, they violated the Constitution. The question would be, is what they did unconstitutional, not whether it is justified or not. And if you have the majority of judges who are more constitutionalists than they are, say, up for interpretationists, or whatever you want to call it, they're probably going to rule in favor of Texas, frankly. Of course, that would be also a serious move because that would very likely either delegitimize their votes in the Electoral College or allow the state legislatures to appoint their own electors, which would very likely mean a Trump victory if they were to go through that course of action. Again, we'll have to see how it plays out. Again, this is pure analysis based on my observations and based on the information we're looking at. So take it for what it's worth. And one more question that I'll go into the information. Jimmy Ling again, always appreciate the support. The Texas will lead to the survival of our Constitution. If the court disregarded this lawsuit, it will lead to civil war or dissolution of the Union as we know it. It's very possible. And also, you said Texas will lead to the survival of our Constitution. Yeah, saying again, that is true as well. If the Supreme Court again were to toss this out, if they were to toss this out for half the country, and all the Republican states essentially that are getting behind it on the backing Texas, it would be seen as a partisan move. It would be seen as a partisan move that says we're not even going to allow fair trial in terms of whether the Constitution was followed or violated. And if we, for example, lose the ability to have fair elections, if the elections can be changed on a whim, that would damage the integrity of the election system in the U.S., one of the core foundations of our system of government. And if the Supreme Court itself were to not be willing to hear this case, to not be willing to bring this case to trial, to observe that, it would also mean these systems of justice in this country had failed in that regard, which would be a pretty serious blow as well. Meaning that two of the foundations of government, law, rule of law, and also the Constitution as well, and also the system of elections as well. All three of these would be overturned essentially. And and of course, the other side on the Democrats, their argument is, the numbers say we won. How dare you question it, essentially. The issue isn't whether they won or not. The issue isn't whether Americans, casted their votes and these votes have determined what happened. The issue is that, if this was the case, votes were counted that should not have been counted. That's the issue, meaning that argument doesn't work in that regard. Now, again, we'll have to see what happens. Let me go deeper into the story now. Those of you coming in a bit late, we're going over the 39 states that have picked sides in the Texas Supreme Court election lawsuit. And this is them, again, not joining the lawsuit technically. This is states weighing in basically on whether they support it or whether they oppose it. And they're calling on the Supreme Court, mostly on the Democrat side, to toss it out, or on the Republican side to let it go to trial, to hear it. Now, Texas sued the 4 battleground states on December 8th, alleging that officials there conducted the 2020 general election in violation of the Constitution. The lawsuit alleges that the defendant states illegally altered election laws, causing a flood of mail-in votes after removing ballot integrity measures. In other words, they changed the laws on how ballots have to be vetted, these mail-in ballots, laws that were made to protect against fraud. They removed a lot of these measures in order to make more votes accepted, which has led to a lot of the irregularities we've been seeing, and also pushed through laws to create more mail-in ballots, to some of them basically sending out to every person on their voting rolls. And so on one side, increasing the amount of these ballots going out, and on the other side, removing these safeguards to ensure that fraud doesn't take place. This is the problem. And again, the way elections are held state by state is kind of up to the state. The problem is, again, it has to go through the state legislature. And the constitutional violation here is that they illegally altered the election laws. That's the allegation. They illegally altered the election laws because they didn't go through the state legislature. This was passed by bypassing what is required by the Constitution. Now, it says the resulting irregularities put the ultimate outcome of the election in doubt, according to Texas. The Trump campaign and the states of Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Utah filed formal motions to intervene in the lawsuit on behalf of Texas. None of the Democratic attorney generals have yet taken the same step. Now, while opposing the relief sought by Texas, Ohio's Yost argued that the court should still resolve the fundamental question in our state. Does the Constitution permit state courts and state officials to alter election rules enacted by their legislatures? Now, the people need an answer too. This is a quote from him. The people need an answer too. This is Yost again. Until they get one, elections will continue to be plagued by doubts regarding whether the president was chosen in the constitutionally prescribed manner. And, just a bit more on this too. We should pay attention to what's at stake with this. What happens if the elections can be changed by local governments and not go through the normal process of the Constitution? If laws can be changed, if safeguards can be removed, if they can clear the way for things that are made to prevent against fraud, if they're able to change these things in ways that weaken the integrity of the systems, and then again we have the elections called into question because so many issues come up through the removal of these systems to make sure that there is integrity in the systems. What then happens with the American people who become disenfranchised? What then happens if the perception of the way elections can be done is, oh, well, my political party might lose, and so I'm just going to remove these safeguards and make it easier to commit fraud if I so choose. And then, if that just becomes the way of doing things, whether or not that happened in this election, if it becomes acceptable for local governments to change laws and then clear the way for fraud that they could commit, what does that mean going forward, right? Well, this is one of the problems you have in these banana republics, they call them, countries essentially where these safeguards have been removed and where elections are basically run like mafia organizations, where organized crime and criminal groups can, get into the elections and do things like this because committing crime is how they operate. What then happens if that becomes the way of doing things with government? Well, then you're going to have a criminal organization essentially functioning as your government, which you have in many countries in the world, unfortunately, which you have in a lot of countries in Latin America right now. This is one of the term, again, banana republic, one of the issues it refers to. Yeah. Anyways, and an issue you have too, like I mentioned as well, one of the rally I was at today doing the live broadcast from was to designate the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization, because essentially the government there operates like a criminal organization. And when crime and law merge together, the criminals hold the levers of the law. And the criminals can alter or use the levers of the law to clear the way for their operations, eliminate adversaries, and use the systems of international diplomacy as ways to stuff their own pockets, to clear the way for their own corrupt deals. Business then and government become one, and crime becomes the way of doing things. And when it comes to the corruption we're seeing in the US right now and in many countries in the world, I'd say this is a symptom of this having already happened to an extent. Real quick here. Kenny Berenger, I really appreciate the donation. In North Carolina, the Democratic Attorney General backed Pennsylvania in the lawsuit. The people of North Carolina voted for Trump. What can the people of North Carolina do? It's not what the people of North Carolina, it's not what the people on North Carolina want at all. Yeah. Well, I'll be going over some more details on this, state by state, in terms of the main ones at least. Anaf Habib, thanks for the donation. Dem goons are probably intimidating the family of SCOTUS justices as we speak. They did do it before during the hearings to appoint them. Kavanaugh is one of the clear examples of that. Objectively, the case is cut and dry, but judges are people as well at the end of the day. They will throw it out due to said domestic terrorism. Who knows? One thing I've learned so far when it comes to government, when it comes to 2020, is that just about anything may be possible. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It does seem to be the case that just about anything is possible. And we've also seen a lot of the, rats essentially coming out of the say darkness of the night. We're seeing a lot of issues of fraud. We're seeing a lot of groups being engaged in what appears to be corruption. We're seeing now a lot of ties with government officials and the Chinese Communist Party especially. And frankly, I think this is going to be a trend that's going to continue to expose itself. Many individuals that people thought were trustworthy are now being shown to be otherwise. And Trump, whether you like him or not, he is cleaning house, even as this election challenge is taking place. For example, what's happening right now with the Defense Department, he's really been cleaning house. And, I could give my opinion on what might be happening, but to be honest right now, the number of answers we're getting are pretty thin. And so there's a lot of speculation, I'd say. Now let's go deeper into what's happening. The Democratic Attorney General, referring to Yost again in this case, the Democratic Attorney General argued that the Electors Clause of the Constitution, which Texas claims has been violated, allows no space to second-guess decisions made by state courts and legislatures. Democrats claimed that the election rule changes enacted in 2020 were common sense measures to stem the spread of the 2020, again, CCP virus, commonly known as the novel coronavirus, and that the changes didn't introduce widespread fraud. In other words, do you believe, again, that the local governments had the right to alter the election laws if they did so allegedly in order to protect against the virus spreading? The allegation was that, they have to send mail-in ballots because going in person to vote is too dangerous, because you may contract the virus and you need to isolate yourself and you have to practice social distancing and so on. The problem with that narrative is that how many local governors allowed people to join these mass protests opposing Trump? How many of them said that, politics is more important than safety at this point? Remember when they had these nurses and doctors come out and say that, it's more important basically to support politics right now because this is more important than our health? After they told people, of course, if you go outside and protest, you're, killing grandma, I think was the allegation. In other words, if you go out and protest, you might infect the elderly and it's your fault. There was a double standard on those protests. Even people joining the Trump rallies was called irresponsible and bigoted and whatever label they had for it. But joining these mass riots that took place across the country, even these TAZ sites and so on, temporary autonomous zones or CHOP sites, that was okay in some places. And so again, there was a double standard. If they believed that people were in danger because of they might go out and vote or join these mass gatherings, why did they allow it on the other side when it served their own political interests? Why did they say it was okay when it served their political interests, but opposed it when it went against their political interests? Right? So is this politics or is this real concern for people's safety? What's really the issue here? Is this more about politics or is it more about people's safety? And frankly, if it's more about politics, which we can see them basically having to have a lot on during the protests, that means that, well, if it's politics, why not maintain the integrity of our voting systems rather than do something that very likely can lead to fraud, right? This, I think, is going to be one of the main arguments that's going to come up in the courts, because this is, again, on the Democrat side, the main basis of the argument they're making, that the governments, the local governors, even though, yes, they did bypass the normal way things have to be done, that they did it out of like a state of emergency. They did it out of necessity to protect public health. That will be the argument. We'll have to see how the court rules on this. If the court sticks strictly Constitution, Trump is probably going to win. If the court, says, okay, 2020 was a strange year and local governments were trying to, prevent the spread of the virus and they want to not pay attention to the way they treated the riots, maybe they'll rule in favor of the defendants. We'll have to see. Now going deeper into this. Now, the 4 defendant states each filed separate briefs in opposition to Texas, and I'll go over what they're saying. Now, the Pennsylvania brief says this: Texas seeks to invalidate elections in 4 states for yielding results with which it disagrees. It requests for this court to exercise its original jurisdiction and then anoint Texas's preferred candidate for president is illegally indefensible and is an affront to principles to constitutional democracy. In other words, Pennsylvania is trying to have it thrown out just on the grounds that they're saying that Texas is doing this out of political interest, not because they actually think something wrong was done. They're claiming it's just a bias thing. Now, in addition to the states, a battery of briefs from other parties poured in around the time of the court's 3 p.m. deadline. A group of 106 Republican House members backed Texas. Now, this is the brief from them stating, let me paste it into the chat so y'all can follow if you're interested. I have in the live chat the letter from the Republican candidates, the Republican legislatures in the House, the 106 of them. And they said this: the legislature of every defendant state had established detailed rules by which that state's appointment of presidential electors should have been conducted. However, in the months before the 2020 election, those rules were deliberately changed by both state and non-state actors. Let's break that down. The legislature of every defendant state had established detailed rules by which that state's appointment of presidential electors should have been conducted. However, in the months before the 2020 election, those rules were deliberately changed by both state and non-state actors. They're alleging that on the government side and on the non-government side, they changed the way these things were done and went against the legislature of all these states that had already established detailed rules on this. Meaning, again, they altered the way things were done. Now, they continue stating this: the clear authority of those state legislatures to determine the rules for appointing electors was usurped at various times by governors, secretaries of state, election officials, state courts, federal courts, and private parties. Now, a few of you are mentioning as well Rumble. Those of you, you can watch the video we did yesterday talking again about YouTube threatening to delete people's videos on YouTube if they call into question the integrity of the election. It's vague still how that works. It does seem to be the case that they'll only delete videos if you violate two rules, and so you have to do them in conjunction with each other. I won't repeat those rules again. You can watch the video yesterday. If they do delete videos on this channel, though, we have started a page on Rumble. So, folks, please make sure you subscribe to Crossroads on Rumble. We're also looking at other options. And we're also actually looking at some options as well for better ways to broadcast these lives, including, for example, using systems that allow us to broadcast on multiple platforms simultaneously. So you can choose to watch us on YouTube. You can choose to watch us, I don't know, we'll have to see, maybe on Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that. Probably pick a better one than those, but, hear me out. We'll probably find a way to broadcast simultaneously on multiple platforms. And so we'll have a less centralized method of doing this in case they try to censor us. And it's unfortunate we even have to talk like this right now. Hopefully the storm will clear once these things with the elections are over. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If Trump does get reelected, I really think he's going to remove Section 230 protections, meaning that these different platforms, for them right now, these elections are life and death. These elections, the outcome of it, will determine whether they are able to continue operating as normal or whether they're hit with a constant and probably nonstop barrage of lawsuits by losing again that Section 230 protection, which protects them from lawsuits. We'll have to see. Now, last part on this, it says legacy media outlets have declared former Vice President Joe Biden the winner in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. President Donald Trump has not conceded the race and continues to pursue legal challenges in the 4 defendant states, as well as in Arizona and Nevada. Now, some other things here. Give me one sec. I won't go too deep. I won't go deeper into what's happening now with the Pennsylvania case. With the Texas case. Now, the Pennsylvania House leaders have filed briefs to support Texas in the Supreme Court lawsuit against Pennsylvania. You do see dissent happening even in some of these states. Now, Pennsylvania's House Speaker and Majority Leader on Thursday filed an amici curiae brief with the Supreme Court against the state of Pennsylvania and in favor of Texas's lawsuit against the Commonwealth and 3 other states. In other words, Pennsylvania being a defendant, the again, House Speaker and Majority Leader are actually opposing their own state on this, which is a pretty interesting thing as well. I'll paste again the article on that if you're all interested. I won't go too deep into it because I'll be repeating a lot of the same things, but I have some other stuff on this. This is a statement now from Trump when it comes to what's happening now. And Trump said this. He said the Supreme Court, quote, has a chance to save our country. This is the way he's regarding it, what he's saying on it. Now, President Donald Trump asserted on Thursday that the nation's highest court can save America depending on what happens in the coming weeks. And he said this, quote, the Supreme Court has a chance to save our country from the greatest election abuse in the history of the United States. 78% of people feel no, the election was rigged. Now, Trump was referencing the major lawsuit brought by Texas this week to the Supreme Court. I won't go deeper into this again because I'll be repeating some stuff. Now, I have some interesting stuff for you in addition to this. Now, give me one sec. I'm going to paste into the chat a very interesting story. I think you'll all find maybe slightly entertaining and also slightly concerning. Now, I'm sure you've all seen these Facebook fact checkers, right? If you've shared some of my videos, maybe you've gotten alerts saying you shared fake news. And I've explained some of the context of at least one of those claims when it came to the Georgia case. They were calling the whole Georgia video surveillance footage fake news. Now, guess who's behind some of these fact checkers? Guess who is working with Facebook on some of these fact checkers? TikTok, funded through Chinese communist money. TikTok, funded through Chinese money. Let me go into it. It says Facebook fact checkers funded by Chinese money through TikTok. And again, remember that TikTok just got banned in the US because it couldn't display its independence from the Chinese Communist Party. Now, while Facebook portrays its army of fact checkers as independent, the money behind at least one carries a distinct taint. One such fact checker, Lead Stories, is partly paid through a partnership with TikTok, a social media platform run by a Chinese company that owes its allegiance to the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok currently is being probed by U.S. officials as a national security threat. Moreover, the organization that's supposed to oversee the quality of fact checkers is run by Pointer Institute, another TikTok partner. The organization that's supposed to oversee the quality of fact checkers is being run by Pointer Institute, which is a partner of TikTok, meaning that TikTok under ByteDance does have some say, we can say based on this, in what is able to be seen by Americans. And TikTok, one of the reasons why it was banned in the US was because of concerns that the Chinese Communist Party could use it for information warfare, for public, censorship, for monitoring people, for publishing stories, basically propaganda for the CCP, as well as WeChat. Now, it says here, Lead Stories says it's been contracted by ByteDance, which is the parent company of TikTok, for fact-checking related work, referring to TikTok's announcement earlier this year that it has partnered with several organizations to further aid our effort to reduce the spread of misinformation. TikTok, right? Working to reduce the spread of misinformation under the Chinese Communist Party. Now, those of you who have followed my reporting on China know about TikTok and know about ByteDance, because the company that owns TikTok, the head of which is ByteDance, the head of that company, wrote a public apology to the Chinese Communist Party a couple years back, apologizing to the CCP for not closely enough following its rules on information, and then pledging that he would use his organization, meaning ByteDance, in order to serve the propaganda interests of the Chinese Communist Party. And here we have TikTok being under ByteDance, talking about reducing the spread of misinformation on American platforms. Not just an American platform, but everywhere that you have Facebook. Meaning, again, that a company that has said it will censor and alter information on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party has a say in what you can or can't read, right? Now, they say this is particularly regarding the CCP virus pandemic, which originated in China and was exacerbated by the CCP's cover-up. Now, Lead Stories was started in 2015 by Belgian website developer Martin Schenk, CNN veteran Alan Duke, and two lawyers from Florida and Colorado. It listed operation expenses of less than $50,000 in 2017, but had expanded sevenfold by 2019, largely because of the more than $460,000 that Facebook paid it for fact-checking story services in 2018 and 2019. Meaning this company is basically propped up by Facebook financially. Now, moving into this more. The company took on more than a dozen staffers. About half of them were CNN alumni, and became one of Facebook's most prolific fact checkers of U.S. content. So one of the most prolific fact checkers, the organization in charge of saying, vetting what you want to post on on Facebook, vetting what you want to post on Facebook, and telling you whether you pasted fake news or real news. The organization, right, that is fact checking what you are posting on your Facebook page and alerting you, even blocking you sometimes, when you post content that they deem as fake. This is being controlled by CNN alumni, people who worked at CNN, and I assume you all trust CNN now. I assume you all trust CNN, and you trust them for vetting your content because maybe you don't feel confident in your ability to read these stories and judge them yourselves, right? You need CNN to do it for you. CNN alumni and ByteDance, TikTok. The Chinese company and CNN are determining what you can or can't say on Facebook. They're the ones vetting your content and saying what is true or not, right? Now, this is concerning. I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek, but this is a bit concerning because, frankly, as a journalist, I have to fact-check these guys all the time. When I write my stories, I cannot rewrite what they say. I cannot go and rewrite their content. I have to go to the original sources, look at what they said, and judge based on all the information, whether it's true or not. And I can tell you they alter stories all the time. They take quotes out of context all the time. They change things all the time. And frankly, they've been showed many, many times of spreading fake news. These organizations that have a clear political bias and have altered information based on that political bias are the ones vetting your content. And given, again, these are former members of CNN, former staff members. And again, TikTok under ByteDance, the head of which, again, made a public pledge to support the CCP's information operations. These are the guys running the most prolific fact checker, one of the most prolific fact checkers on Facebook for U.S. content. Now, this year, the funding sources included Google, Facebook, ByteDance, and several online advertising services. Advertising brought in less than $25,000 last year, the group said. The bulk of the funding still comes from Facebook. In other words, Facebook mostly is propping up this organization that is a glorified partnership of former CNN members, we would call them, and ByteDance. Now, part of its revenue comes from subscriptions to Trendalizer, its viral content tracking tool. And it says, for privacy reasons, we cannot reveal the list of Trendalizer users, but none of them individually accounted for more than 5% of our revenue. Now, the Trendalizer website only shows 3 pages powered by it: Trendalizer.com, LeadStories.com, and Storytide.com, a news aggregator started by Lead Stories in 2016. And Lead Stories did not immediately respond to emailed questions from the Epoch Times. Now, bizarre times we're in. Just real quick. Wow, just saw the donation. I have to apologize. I can't read your name because it's in Korean, but I do appreciate the support. And it says here, thank you from South Korea. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Catalia Fortis, thank you for the support. Hi, Josh. Just me, Cat. I can't believe how deep the CCP has installed themselves in the U.S. Did you see this all coming? Unfortunately, yes, I did. And again, I've been writing about Chinese Communist Party subversion going back to 2008. And so maybe in some ways I'm a bit desensitized to it, to be honest. But I'm glad also that it's coming to the surface. I've mentioned before, if you've been watching my show going back, a year, more than a year now. It's only been about a year now, year and a half. I mentioned before, if you could see the full scale of how the Chinese Communist Party has had active programs to subvert academics, journalists, politicians, business leaders, bankers, people in our financial institutions, journalists again, academics, researchers, people at think tanks, anyone of influence. Every one of these people is going to be targeted. Once you reach a certain level of influence, you are going to be targeted. And the number of people who've been compromised by it is beyond shocking. I think we started to see some of that come to the surface several months back. For example, when the Trump administration was going after universities, especially the Department of Education was going after universities and showing that they'd received billions and billions of dollars of undisclosed donations, many of which came from the Chinese Communist Party or groups tied to the CCP. And also showing, for example, just the 1,000 Talents program, one of the CCP's programs for overt espionage, compromising people and getting them on the CCP's payroll. How many professors and researchers were part of that? That didn't even scratch the surface on journalists who've been compromised. That did nothing really, or was starting to, but really didn't do anything yet to scratch the surface of things like for example, United Front Work Department, which was just starting to get called out, which focuses heavily on compromising politicians in the U.S. Not to mention even scratching the surface of what just outright political warfare. For example, operations done under the liaison department of the General Political Department. The CCP has entire branches of its government dedicated to compromising elites in foreign countries, including the United States. And so, frankly, it's if anything, I'm surprised more people haven't been named and exposed on this already. And I would assume that a lot of people who've received money from the Chinese Communist Party and made deals selling out their local, the people they're in charge of, selling out their states or whatever on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, I bet they're shaking in their boots right now because this is becoming the narrative in the U.S. It's becoming the narrative right now. How many governors have sold out to the CCP? How many politicians have sold out to the CCP? And I guarantee you, it's going to very soon be how many businesses, how many big tech gurus, how many journalists, how many academics have sold out to the CCP, and looking at the direct impact that has had on their work and in terms of how they support or oppose this country. I think that's going to become one of the major points of discussion in this country going forward. Now, let's see here. CP23. Some of these laws on mail-in voting were changed in October 2019, like Pennsylvania, for example, before the virus was even known. Kind of interesting, huh? That is interesting. 2019, it was spreading a bit, but that was when it was just starting to come out, of course, and who knows what the intention was. That is very interesting, though. Curious Q&A. Thanks for the support. Thank you for being amazing, awesomeness, truth, and supporting human rights. Doing my best. Thank you. Question. It seems at every turn the CCP has footprints in it. That is true. With election, is it the case that CCP wanted USA to be unstable, and causing infighting among people and political leaders? Well, for this, I'd point to Yuri Bezmenov, a Soviet defector. He's no longer with us. He's deceased. He did a very popular video. You can look it up on YouTube, Yuri Bezmenov, talking about ideological subversion. He also wrote a book under a different name. He was under witness protection. His witness protection name was Thomas Schulman. And he wrote a book under the name of Thomas Schulman called Love Letter to America. It's very hard to find in print, but you can download PDFs of it. I think they have it on archive.org last I checked. But it's pretty much the same thing he says in his video interview, but based on this point, right? The question being, would the CCP want the U.S. unstable and cause infighting among people and political leaders? That is one of the 4 stages of subversion, of ideological subversion. The 4 stages being demoralization, destabilization, conflict, and normalization. And hear me out. It basically means you demoralize people, you break their spirits, you eliminate their faith in the institutions and the systems that make their country run. You destroy the things that make them who they are. What is it that constitutes a nation, right? What is it that constitutes a nation? Culture, your founding stories, the values passed on to you generation by generation, your religion, your beliefs, your movies and films and books and stories that shape your cultural system of awareness and how you interpret information. Your faith in the institutions, police, government, law, the way your country functions. All of these should be damaged in some way under the concept of demoralization. This is based on Soviet tactics when they were running these operations. All these things should be damaged in some way. For example, you want to take, if you read his book, Love Letter to America, he has a chart breaking all this down. For example, if the church is one of the foundations of the country, you want to make the church serve the opposite function, that it serves a mundane, right? A mundane task rather than a divine task. You want it to focus on the mundane world rather than on the spiritual progress or spiritual world of the individual. You want the church to focus on things not related to religion, essentially. You want useless entertainment or entertainment that's damaging to people. You want to do things that make people call into question the elements of social harmony. Because what makes a nation, or a big nation, I should say, rather than a tribalist society? A tribe is, of course, people of the same culture, same beliefs, same everything, basically sticking to their own little system. A nation, like the United States, is a combination of multiple tribes agreeing to overlook their differences and form a country that can work together, that can function as a nation. A normal country needs to function through tolerance. And the word tolerance has been messed up these days. Tolerance is not the forced acceptance of another person's values. Tolerance is the recognition of things that you don't agree with and agreeing to tolerate those things and look past those things to see an individual that you can still care about regardless of your differences. That's tolerance. Tolerance is not being moved by things, right? It's not the forceful acceptance of morals different from your own, because that's a downward trend that's going to result in the abandonment of morals, because there's always going to be something that goes against your values, right? And if tolerance is defined as the forceful removal of your values in order to accept these things, that's not tolerance anymore. That's forced acceptance. That's forced adherence to a downward moral trajectory that will destroy society. Tolerance and the basic systems of social harmony, right, again, are things that make a nation function. And a communist system, through demoralization and destabilization, will try to break that. You want there to be conflicts between all these different camps, all these different tribes in the society. You want people to fight each other. You want there to be conflicts in the streets. You want people to hate each other, because it's this conflict. If we go deeper into communist thought, dialectical materialism being the struggle of opposites, based on the Hegelian dialectical theory of conflict leads forward, right? They had this idea of social evolution, and that if evolution is based on the survival of the fittest, then how do you speed that up? How do you speed up the evolutionary process if that's what you believe in? Well, you increase the antagonisms between different groups of people in society. And through that conflict, through the struggle of opposites, the strongest survives, right? The survival of the fittest, and the fittest becomes the one that drives forward the society. That's the basis of Hegelian dialectics, and one of the things that Marx adopted into dialectical, his own dialectical materialism. And again, the systems of subversion are based on the same thing, that you want people to develop these tensions, because it's those tensions that start breaking down the society, and eventually leading to open conflict, where you have civil war or other forms of open conflict, and to bring the crisis in the society, to bring the social disharmony to such a state, to bring the mental pressure people feel to such an extent that they will accept any kind of social structure that will restore a sense of stability. And that is what they call normalization. That is where a foreign regime moves in and institutes regime change. That's where you have your March on Rome. That's where you have your, seizing of the palace, or whatever it might be. Whatever method they use to seize control of the country and to restore order, to normalize it. And as many have pointed out, the irony of that is that the revolutionaries at that time, the people who have been used by these groups to do these things, are often the first ones to be executed. What they call useful idiots. They're useful for the revolutionary process and the breaking down of society. But once you do that, you no longer need instability. You need stability because you've achieved your goals. And the elements of instability are the first to be eliminated. And that is the process of spreading these types of governments. That was the process, the model of spreading the global communist revolution under the Soviet Union, and the Chinese Communist Party, under its unrestricted warfare doctrine, is doing the same thing. That's the basis of it. Just to answer your question. Let's see here. Jimmy Ling, again, I always appreciate the support. One sec. Genuinely, really. Joseph Stalin, famous quote, this is according to Jimmy Ling. It's not the people who vote that count. It's the people who count the votes. And I've heard that quote quite a few times now, yeah. The Democrat Party and the left used the pandemic as an excuse, but the above narrative was their main motive. Socialism, progressivism, and communism style elections. Let's see here. Laser Hobbyist, thanks for the donation again also. Move off of Facebook and YouTube who censor. Facebook just canceled my commercial account for an advertisement they said broke their rules, but I have not used for a year for calling their fact checkers fake. Yeah. And again, we've been going over these fact checkers here. Now, it's getting late. Let me go over this a bit more, and then I'll go over a few more questions. Real quick, Chris A., thanks for the support. I love your show, Josh. Appreciate it. Thank you. Have you checked out www.gtv or G? Don't mind the grammar. I don't want to get banned. It's really sad and pretty messed up. I assume you're talking about Guo, is it? I forget. I always forget his name. The Guo channel, the Chinese billionaire. He has some decent stuff sometimes. He has some interesting stuff. I think it's worth checking out. It's always, I do tend to like to fact check all these things myself too. And he does have some interesting stories though sometimes. Beverly, thank you for support. Thank you, Joshua, for your dedication to keeping us informed. Again, doing my best, and thank you for the support as well. Now, jumping back into what we're seeing with this, I won't go deeper into ByteDance and so on, but you can check out the story again. I'll paste the link. It's quite a long story. One of our reporters, Peter Svab, did it. It's very good. Pasting the link into the live chat, those of you interested. Real quick, another update though on China. Now, those of you who missed the video today, please check it out. I did a live broadcast from the ground in Washington, where it was actually mostly Muslim Uyghurs running it. But you had, for example, the guys from the Stop the Steal rallies. You had the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles there. You had Christians, Catholics, Falun Gong practitioners, Tibetans, all kinds of groups coming together and taking a stand against the Chinese Communist Party. It was very interesting to see. You can watch the live broadcast I did where we had all the different speakers. And then afterwards, I did a Q&A with some of them. And it was a bit funny. It's a bit funny, because it's on the ground. And when you're doing live, it's, things are a bit more unstructured. But we got some great people on, really, really great people. So please check it out. SD Solis, thanks for the donation. Now, real quick again, Saturday, I'm going to be also at the Stop the Steal rally in Washington. And we're going to be doing a live broadcast there as well. So you're going to be on the ground there. Come check us out. It's going to be pretty big, allegedly. If it's as big as last week, we'll have to see. Real quick, though, big update. This is a first. This is from right here. Real quick. I'm going to post it into the chat right here. They have a limit on the number of keywords I can use, or the number of characters. I'll have to read it to you. This is from the U.S. Department of State. It said public designations of current and former government officials under Section 7031C of the Department of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Appropriations Act due to involvement in gross violations of human rights. This is from Pompeo, a press statement passed today. Again, hear me out. It says, promoting and advancing respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms continues to be a priority for the United States. On this Human Rights Day, the United States proudly reaffirms its commitment to using every appropriate tool and authority available to draw attention to violations and abuses of human rights, no matter where or when they occur, and to promote accountability for those responsible for those violations and abuses. And what they're doing here is they are now calling out the Chinese Communist Party and key individuals in the Chinese Communist Party for the persecution of Falun Gong, for their involvement in the persecution of Falun Gong. Right? Let me go into the part specifically on this. It says the State Department is designating Chief Huang Yuanxiang of the Xiamen Public Security Bureau Wukan Police Station for his involvement in gross violations of human rights in Xiamen, China. Huang is associated with particularly severe violations of religious freedom of Falun Gong practitioners, namely his involvement in the detention and interrogation of Falun Gong practitioners for practicing their beliefs. Today's action also applies to Mr. Huang's spouse. The world cannot stand idly by as the PRC, the People's Republic of China government, perpetrates horrific and systematic abuses against people in China, including violating an internationally recognizing right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion or belief. Now, this is a big deal. This is one individual and his wife and his spouse with the Xiamen Public Security Bureau in China, the police station there, being sanctioned now for persecutions against Falun Gong. This is a shot over the bow for the Chinese Communist Party. Because if you are in the Chinese Communist Party, if you've maintained your position in the CCP, it has almost been impossible to get that position if you did not support in some way the CCP's human rights abuses. If people who persecuted Falun Gong and other religions in China as well are being sanctioned, not a single Chinese Communist Party official, almost not a single one of them is going to not be guilty of this. If this goes through, this is going to be, Nuremberg trials part 2. If this goes through, look, they use Falun Gong practitioners, Muslim Uyghurs, and some house Christians as living sources for organ transplants. They kill people for their organs. This has been widely exposed. Now it's no longer conspiracy theory. Epoch Times actually first broke the story on this going back several years. This is a shot across the bow for the Chinese Communist Party. This is, again, a persecution targeting Falun Gong alone. 100 million people in China, estimated 70 million to 100 million people estimated. This is a persecution that impacted just about every single person in China, either directly or through their family members. This is, again, something that will have the Chinese Communist Party shaking in their boots right now, because every one of them has blood on their hands. And if they could be sanctioned and punished and who knows what else for carrying out these persecutions, not a single one of them is going to be free from this. And this is serious again. We'll have to see, again, whether Barr stays in, depending on how things go, and on whether, again, what happens with, if Biden does win, we'll have to see whether he'll keep this or not. But this is a very, very serious act that could basically lend to the case of designating the Chinese Communist Party a transnational criminal organization, or even worse than that, for them at least, leading to some kind of Nuremberg trial situation, because many of them, almost all of them, have blood on their hands. Now, folks, just go in here. SD Solis, thank you again. I appreciate it. Good Hope, thank you. Can they shut down Gmail accounts, and should we use VPN? I have not personally seen them taking down Gmail accounts. I wouldn't put anything beyond them at this time. If Google itself, and Google runs, YouTube, or they're part of the ownership of it. If they have agreed to censor based on political ideology, I wouldn't put anything beyond them. And we'll have to see as well whether this spreads to other platforms also. They didn't delete my video yesterday, which says something. I did read what we can get from the requirements. We'll have to see as it plays out how tight these censorship requirements are with YouTube. If they start banning channels or blocking content or giving people strikes based on just talking about, the legal challenges in the election, I'm not going to silence myself, frankly. And so, worst case scenario, we're just going to, be on Rumble or another channel. So don't worry, we're not going to cancel anything. We're always going to be here. Worst case scenario, just going to have to find us on another channel. And I know some of these other ones are working on live video formats, so we can do the same thing there. It won't make any difference. So don't worry, folks. This won't affect us, frankly. And hopefully they don't. And hopefully they don't censor us. Again, I try to walk a good line in terms of. Getting the facts right and presenting things as they are. And so, we'll see. But again, don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. David Hardy, thanks to the support. If Texas loses this case, is there still a chance for limited martial law? I wouldn't put it beyond Trump, to be honest. Just saying. We'll have to see. Taylor Healed, please tell me you've seen Fall of Cabal now. So important. Preceding your COVID-19 or COVID 4-part video on BitChute and the coronavirus unmasked 1 and 2 from 220. I have checked it out. I find it interesting. Let's put it that way. All right, folks. That said, I'm going to call it a night. One quick one from Sim Vic. Thank you. Josh, would you consider doing a longer show? It's too good to limit to only 1 hour. I would. On that note, too, again, this coming Saturday, I'm going to be broadcasting live from the Stop the Steal rally, and I think we're going to do like a 4-hour broadcast. And so if you want to watch me for 4 hours, join us on Saturday. All right, folks, it's getting late. I'm going to call it a night. Always appreciate the support. I always enjoy talking to you all. That said, please take care of yourselves. If you're going to be out on Saturday, come find me at the Stop the Steal rally. I'll be doing a broadcast there. You can't miss me. Again, always appreciate the support. Take care of yourselves and stay informed as always, and stay free. Thank you.